Good evening. Happy Saturday to everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of Fighting the Void. I am, of course, Eric. As always, you can follow me at Gingerman Editor on the on the Twitters there. And you can also follow the show itself at Fighting Void on Twitter. And unfortunately, my co-host isn't with us today. Crystal's had some other things she's got to take care of, but she'll be back in 2 weeks for our Hobbit discussion. With me today, though, is Paige Rogers. She is also known on Twitter as @PaintingPastor. You can follow her there. And she writes regular articles for a website called the Knock Report. That's noqreport.com. And one of her more interesting series of articles that she writes is Red Pills, which is, of course, as you might imagine, a series of articles telling you things that you should know but probably don't, that might run a little contrary to whatever knowledge you received. So, Paige, first of all, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It is really great to have you. I've known Paige on Twitter for a while now. I think we first came into contact because of David, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Yeah, and then of course there's another now mutual friend that Paige introduced me to through one of the Follow Friday notification bombs, and so we've been part of a eclectic group, shall we say, on Twitter, which is also a lot of fun. But
AKA the Misfit group.
yes. It's kind of it's definitely an island of misfit toys, that's for sure.
Definitely.
All the more enjoyable for it. So, also, I should mention that if you want to comment, you can do that either on the YouTube channel. I've got that up and running. Click on the link that I put in the tweet, or you can just go right on Twitter and address us directly there. I've got the notifications up and everything, so you'll be able to comment, ask questions, and express your shock. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know this before. So, Paige, our main issue that we wanted to focus on, though, was something that a lot of our audience may already know a little bit about, and that's the whole Israeli-Palestinian issue. Mm-hmm. And, well, I think the biggest, why don't you take it from there? What made you look into it in the first place?
I don't remember what event was occurring at the time, but it was during Obama's presidency. Mm-hmm. And I noticed the tension between he and Netanyahu.
Right.
And again, I don't remember the exact events, but I realized that I really didn't know the history of modern Israel. Right. We all learned in school about the United Nations, founding Israel, and so forth. And then that's it. Yeah. Nothing before, nothing after, unless you're talking about ancient Israel from the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I just thought, why don't I know any of this? So as a former educator, I love to learn and just wanted to look into it, and was kind of flabbergasted about what I found because I didn't know any of it.
Okay.
So I mentioned in my article how amazed I am at the historic illiteracy of so many.
And there is a massive amount of it. I mean,
yes.
I consider myself relatively well informed, but there were things in there that I did not know. Not that most of it did not surprise me, such as the Arabs' general, shall we say, reluctance to accept any sort of agreement whatsoever. It's like, okay, I didn't know this went that far back, but I'm not really surprised.
Mm-hmm.
What did surprise me was that there was an invasion right from the start. Going all the way back to 1948 when the UN first set borders.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And really, it's as far back as 1947, because on November 29th is when the UN officially passed the partition of what we call Palestine, which is basically from the Mediterranean Sea and all the way up to the River Jordan. But it had originally included all the way the entire country of Jordan, what we know as Jordan, is actually included in that mandate at first.
Which that was another detail that surprised me when I saw that first map that was included in the article. I was like, wait a minute, that geography doesn't look like Israel. That geography reminds me of Israel plus Jordan. And sure enough, that's exactly what it is. As I scroll through, I'm like, wait a minute, because Jordan's got that telltale little panhandle thing going on there.
Like, yeah, they do. I'm like, it is kind of a funny shape.
Yeah, exactly. Randomly, we're just gonna put a freaking trapezoid as part of the border. I don't know, but honestly, just as an aside, I have no idea what the Brits and the French were thinking when they drew up the borders, post World War II for all of these different countries. I'm like, seriously, what?
I know. I mean, it was all part of the Ottoman Empire. It was a giant country.
It's like,
they just pieced it up.
Were they just, I don't know, really digging the absinthe or something? Locally, sampling some of the local opioids. I don't know.
And I haven't even looked into that, but that's a great question.
Why did they divide it as they did?
Again, another place that we can research.
Which now, I think that right there, actually, the arbitrary dividing lines for most of these nations, I think it feeds into this significantly. And the reason I bring that up is because those borders that you mentioned that the UN tried to set for Israel or over time, they changed significantly. They were at least originally in conception based on borders as near as they could tell going from the Bible.
That's correct.
Okay.
It was a region. It was a region that, gosh, the history goes back so far, it's difficult to even recount the numerous changing of hands. But basically, the area of Judea and the Galilee was conquered by Hadrian of Rome. After there was a second Jewish revolt, and they quashed it, basically destroyed Jerusalem. And he renamed.
Are you referring to the Bar Kokhba revolt?
I don't recall.
Okay,
I'd have to look. I'd have to look at my notes.
Okay, or around 70 AD? Is that what you're thinking, or?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Well,
we're on the same page.
70 AD was when when they first sacked Jerusalem. Yeah. When they actually printed a coin that was called, and actually I've written it down. What was it? It basically meant Jerusalem captured, but it Judea Capta.
Okay.
Latin. And so it wasn't until 135 AD when Hadrian actually renamed Jerusalem itself and renamed the area of Judea and Galilee. And what he renamed it after was Philistia, which was actually only a tiny portion of what is modern day Israel.
Right.
And as if you've read the Bible, you know that the Philistines in Philistia were enemies of the Jews.
Yeah, they didn't get along well.
And so he renamed it after the Jewish enemy. He basically Latinized Philistia into Palestine, but it was just a territory of the Roman Empire. Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting to realize that the term Palestine is almost a slur against the Jews, really. It's like, we're doing this.
It was meant to be.
yeah. We're doing this.
We beat you, we won.
Exactly. Like, we are now going to commence with what typically happens, when one country takes over another, and we're going to commence with eradicating your culture, and that includes taking your name from you and giving you this one instead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the only thing they could, of course, as we all know, the Jews are extremely reticent to give up their culture.
Yeah.
They are,
Right.
they are, shall we say, a difficult pill to swallow. and God bless them for it, because man,
Right.
that's one of the things I most admire. They've been a thorn in so many people's sides for so long, just by being this tiny, tough as nails group of people. I was like, I don't care who you are, you don't mess with those guys.
I know. I mean, when you look at the history and even the modern history, just from, let's say, 1949 to the present, and you realize how many wars that the Jewish people in Israel, what the modern day Israel, have fought, how many times they've been attacked, and they're not being attacked by one country, it'll be 6. And you think just the population difference alone, it's like, this has got to be divine intervention that they keep winning.
Yeah, no kidding. And winning handily as well.
Yes.
They don't just win. They're like, you know what? Not only did we stop your attack, we're going to go ahead and push you back in a week. We're going to own about half your country. So, yeah, I recommend not trying this again.
Yeah.
But now, so the term Palestine comes from Philistia. So I guess the question is then, when we talk about the Palestinian people, what do we actually mean by that?
Well, that's interesting. Now, in my lifetime and in your lifetime, the PLO adopted Palestine as meaning the Arab population, the Muslim population. But before about 1964, 1970, it was rejected by the Arabs as being Zionist. So while the British Mandate was going on, the Jews had already started up newspapers. There was the Palestinian this or the Palestinian that. And the Arabs really rejected it. In fact, I've got a quote for you.
Wait a minute, just a second. Go ahead. No, go ahead with your quote.
So basically, as far back as January 11, 1946, speaking in front of the Anglo-American Committee, which was one of the division plans of Palestine, there is an Arab historian by the name of Philip K. And I apologize if I mispronounce these names. Philip K. Heady. He spoke January 11, 1946, in front of this Anglo-American Committee, and he said, "There is no such thing as Palestine in history, absolutely not." And King Hussein of Jordan said, "The truth is that Jordan is Palestine and Palestine is Jordan." And even in 1977, there was a splinter group of the PLO, which was headed by a man named Zuhair Mushin. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. But March 31st, 1977, in an interview with the Dutch newspaper, he said, "The Palestinian people does not exist. The creation of a Palestinian state is only a means for continuing our struggle against the state of Israel or our Arab unity. In reality, today there is no difference between Jordanians, Palestinians, Syrians, and the Lebanese. Only for political and tactical reasons do we speak today about the existence of a Palestinian people, since Arab national interests demand that we posit the existence of a distinct Palestinian people in opposition to Zionism. For tactical reasons, Jordan, which is a sovereign state with defined borders, cannot raise claims to Haifa and Jaffa, while I can undoubtedly demand Haifa, Jaffa, Beersheba, and Jerusalem. However, the moment we reclaim our right to all of Palestine, we will not even wait a minute to unite Palestine with Jordan."
So
interesting.
Well then, all right, but everybody, all right, take a drink because yeah, that's a big hill right there. That's a big one. So basically,
it was a rare moment of honesty.
Yeah, no kidding. You've got
the
prominent Arabs back in 1967 saying, yeah, historically there is no such thing as Palestine or a Palestinian people, something that 99.9% of the Western world takes for granted today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just assume that there is because everybody keeps freaking talking about it. And all it means, really, is that, okay, a lot of people have decided there's this chunk of land that we're going to call Palestine. And everyone in it is the Palestinian people, unless you're Jewish, essentially.
Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, it referred to anybody who lived there. Everybody who was born there had a birth certificate that said Palestine. Jews, Arabs, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also historically, we know that there's no context at all for our way of understanding that term today.
Mm-hmm.
None, zip, zilch, zero. There is, wow, yeah. Especially those quotes from prominent Arabs during the period of, we can't really say negotiation because if I remember right, the 6-Day War was 1967.
That's correct. Yes.
yeah. So now, right, in terms of negotiating over the borders, but still, kind of an important time frame. Now, we were talking offline just before. It's like this conflict also has existed, and I don't mean the historical, the deep historical conflict between Arabs and Muslims going back. I mean, between Arabs and Muslims, between Muslims and Jews going back to the 7th century with Muhammad. I don't even mean that. I mean just the conflict surrounding the modern state of Israel goes all the way back to its founding after World War II. With, I remember right from your article that there was an invasion already in 1948, mere months after the initial borders had been set by the UN.
That's correct. It was actually the Ottoman Empire lost the land in World War One, and the League of Nations, which had been established to prevent further war, granted Britain, which had sacked the area, ownership over that land. And there had been tumult ever since then. Then with World War II and the atrocities of the Holocaust continuing to come out, pressure became renewed to allow a safe place for Jews to go. They were still being expelled out of countries even after they were liberated from the Nazis. And there was actually a ship of European Jews that fled Europe to the British Mandate of Palestine. I believe there were about 4,500 or 4,100, something around there.
Okay.
And they were intercepted by the British, and they ultimately returned them to Hamburg, Germany, and put them back in displaced person camps. This was in 1947. So then the international community went, "Why are you sending them back to Germany? What is wrong with you?"
Why does anyone think this is a good idea?
Exactly. And so the UN Special Committee on Palestine, which Britain had after not being able to solve the problem since 1917, when they first took over the territory, decided that a single state was not going to work. So many resolutions had been rejected. And so they decided to partition it. And part of that pressure was because of that event just a couple months earlier. But it was the next day when fighting broke out. Now in 1948, it was May 14th of 1948.
Mm-hmm.
And the British officially ended their mandate control over the entire area. So at that moment, an independent Arab state was created. It was in existence,
right,
alongside an independent Jewish state.
Mm-hmm.
That same day, 6 Arab armies invaded what was designated for the Jews.
Yeah,
I mean, ours. They released a statement of declaration to the UN, explaining why they were going in.
Which wasn't what was allotted to the Jews was not an overwhelming chunk of land. It wasn't anything like we were discussing where the initial layout, it basically included Jordan. It was much closer to what we recognize as Israel today.
Correct. Well, but a lot smaller.
Right.
The original mandate was what we know of Israel today and Jordan put together.
Yes.
And because of the failure to compromise and reach a solution, the British decided that everything east of the Jordan River would be all for the what we term today as Palestinians, but would be the Arab state.
Right.
And everything west the Jordan River, so between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, excuse me, I'm sorry, so sorry.
No, you're okay.
Would be for the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the time the UN, I mean, it was just conflict after conflict and disagreement after disagreement. And so when the UN finally had to intervene, they basically were only dealing with the tiny portion left. So 77% of the mandate was given to Jordan, which was called Transjordan. 77%.
Mm-hmm.
But the Arabs in the area were not willing to share that tiny piece left and wanted all of it.
Yeah. That was something that I thought was interesting. It's like that's the way it's always been, because you walk through, again, in the article, over time, all of these different attempts to negotiate a two-state solution. This is nothing new. A lot of people might think that started under the Bush administration, the two-state solution thing, or maybe perhaps under Clinton. But it's
Which
not
is what
even,
I had thought.
Right. It's like, oh, this novel two-state solution idea. No, this is what we've been doing since World War II. We've been trying to negotiate a two-state solution, and every single time, including, again, on the maps and everything that you provide in the article, there is, which incidentally, for those watching, I just repost links to those articles on Twitter, so you can easily find those and go to them and see what we're talking about. And I'll try to remember to include them in the show notes and everything along with the video afterwards. But you show in those maps all these different borders that were proposed that got negotiated down. I'm not sure who all was participating in these negotiations, but basically Israel kept being willing to accept less and less and less until they got basically something not much bigger than the freaking Gaza Strip. And
yeah, it was pretty tiny.
Yeah, this tiny little postage stamp of land along the Mediterranean. And that was it, people. Not Jerusalem.
And it was pieces separated from one another. So it wasn't even really united.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It was like different parts. And Jerusalem was under, depending on the thing, British or UN control. So not even Jewish control.
That's correct. Yeah, the UN.
And every single time, every negotiation, the relevant Arab organizations and nations all say, nope, no, and declare fatwas and everything, which, for clarification's sake, fatwa didn't necessarily mean war or terrorism. Sometimes it just meant basically protesting loudly against it, but it also wound up being a lot of war and terrorism.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of something.
And the tragedy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
The real tragedy in this is that there were a lot of Arab Muslims in that area who were willing to compromise.
Right.
But fairly early on, the reins were seized by hard ideologues. And the representation for Palestine throughout this was a conglomerate of all the Arab nations. And so there wasn't really a solid voice for just the regular Palestinian people.
Right.
So they've kind of been drug along in this. The moderates, I mean, there were plenty of people who wanted to actually make compromise, and they were threatened with death. You could not even sell land to a Jew without being threatened with death.
Yeah, I saw that.
You basically had to shut up.
Yeah. Basically, you weren't allowed. You had a different opinion. Well, that's good for you. You go ahead. You have whatever opinion you want. Just don't tell anyone else.
So it's really a tragedy for them, because this whole time they haven't actually had representation, even though all of these efforts have been in as their representation. Yeah,
and again, for the record, many of the representatives of the so-called Palestinian people, they're not Palestinian. They're coming from other places. Even the most famous, especially for people of my generation, is Yasser Arafat, and
he was trained by the KGB.
I did not know that. That is news to me. I find that interesting. He wasn't from Palestine. He wasn't from Israel. He was from freaking Egypt. People. He was Egyptian. He was not part of the Arabs who live within the borders of Israel or Palestine or whatever you want to call it. He was sent from elsewhere and apparently trained by the KGB, probably to try to undermine the one democracy in the Middle East. So isn't that fun, everybody? the one non-dictatorship in the Middle East is being attacked by an Egyptian claiming to be a Palestinian trained by the freaking Soviets.
That's correct.
So, yeah, that's
and that he was behind the hostage taking in, oh gosh, what year was it? I think it was the 70s. Several of our diplomats were taken hostage, and he wanted to exchange them for Sirhan, who was a Palestinian he's a Palestinian who assassinated Bobby Kennedy. And Nixon declined, and so he ordered that they be killed.
All right.
It sent the Romanian Soviet intelligence group into a panic. Because they knew he was connected to them. They were worried because they had kind of been working with Nixon and trying to get on his good side, and they were really freaked out that this was going to put them on his bad side. But then this was never released.
Okay. Huh. That's interesting. So you think Nixon knew about the connection, or?
Oh yeah, he did.
Okay, he definitely knew. Okay,
it just wasn't released to the public.
So so he could play real politic with it and not look like a squish.
I have no idea.
Okay, wow, that's fascinating. I did not. That is fresh information for me. So okay, so we come through the 40s, the 50s, so on up till now, and the conversation hasn't really changed all that much. In some ways, in other ways, it seems like it might be changing dramatically. The first significant change of the conversation was back when Egypt recognized, hey, Israel, we're going to go ahead and say you have a right to exist. So cool. And then Israel gave them back the Sinai Peninsula, which they took which they conquered in the 6-Day War. Good for you guys. I swear that, just another aside, I was seriously fascinated by Israel's military successes when I was growing up, because I was a total like military jet nerd and everything, read all of these things. So I read a lot about especially Israeli air power back in the day and how that was so essential to their superiority and the way they were able to win these wars so handily. And I was just like, wow, the 6 Day War, you guys took over everything we're still arguing over and more that you gave back already. I was like, I'm impressed. That's all I got to say. I was like, I'm impressed. But
no. Can you imagine giving back land you conquered?
Well, that too. I mean, one, the fact that they were able to conquer it so quickly, and the second that they were like, yeah, you know what? We're gonna say you can have this back. You know, we'll play ball. We'll play ball with you, as long as you're honest. We'll be honest, and there you go. I mean, that just doesn't really happen a whole lot. I mean, there's literally Israel is the second country I can think of. Well, not the second, to be fair. The British and the French and all of them, they gave up their empires and whatnot. But it's in the overall history of man, it's extremely rare to give up territory that you've conquered. Almost never happens. Especially in this case, when you know you're surrounded by people who want to kill you.
Well, and to be fair, there was a lot of pressure put on Israel too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Return that land. But it was also done in good faith that Egypt would not take further action, which, of course, they immediately violated that agreement.
Oh, did they? Explain for the audience.
Oh gosh, I'd have to go back and look. I'd hate to relay. That's a kind of a complex series of events, so I hate to relay it incorrectly.
Okay. All right. Suffice to say, but at some point things did settle down where things have been pretty normal between Egypt and Israel for a while now. Jordan has pretty much gotten on board with the fact that Israel gets to exist, and which is nice since they started out considering it basically part of their country. And even now, Saudi Arabia seems to be getting on board, which that right there I find immensely fascinating. That as soon as I heard that, and that was actually it. I think it was David who first pointed that out to me. I was just like, wow, what weird, strange Twilight Zone world am I living in, where all of a sudden Saudi Arabia is now willing to openly recognize Israel and play ball with them a little bit. It's like, wow, this is so the conversation is changing a little bit, at least, to where now instead of being surrounded by people who openly want to kill them, Israel at least has a few. I don't know if I would go so far as to say allies, but at least there are people who aren't interested in their immediate demise.
Or I don't know. At least they say they aren't.
Or at least they say they are.
I don't know. I would trust.
Fair enough.
It's certainly encouraging the different dialogue that's occurring and what you're hearing out of some of these regimes. It is absolutely very encouraging. I want to believe that it's genuine, but only time will tell.
Yep.
The history hasn't been great, so I don't know.
No, it hasn't. It's been, as you said, one violated agreement after another. Although we haven't had we haven't had a legit invasion of Israel by the surrounding powers for decades now. It's just been, pretty large stream of terrorist attacks. This is true, mostly now through Hamas and Hezbollah, which Iranian proxies essentially. but yeah, it's.
I mean, it is.
It definitely has changed. At least they're not, having to fight whole armies and air forces and so on and so forth. But we also know that Israel has taken their own other actions to protect against terrorist attacks, building their wall in Jerusalem, which was highly controversial at the time. And a lot of people don't know yet that actually has had an effect. I don't know. Do you have numbers on that handy at all? Like how much the terrorist attacks actually went down? Okay.
I don't.
But you would agree that the terrorist attacks, the suicide attacks, went down dramatically once they got that wall up. Not that makes things fun for anybody who's got to go to the other side of that wall, for work or whatever. It does, but you got to do what you got to do to, keep people from blowing up the local Sbarros. Which is exactly.
And you have to remember that they're always going to try to penetrate that border.
Yeah, and
so any physical barrier is worth the delayed gratification of their purpose.
Right.
That's why there's so many tunnels, but they're finding them so often. Or now they have the kites that they're flying over the wall.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, down there in Gaza.
Down with flaming kites.
Yep.
But that in itself is testimony to the effectiveness of that wall when they're resorting to kite burning.
Yeah, which again, I mean, that refers to a different wall, but on the Gaza Strip. But still, your point is exactly right.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, you're talking about the Jerusalem wall.
Yeah, I was talking about the Jerusalem wall. But Gaza Strip is same point. That you know what, their wall actually is effective. It actually is doing what it's supposed to do. Can people still get around it? Yes. Still, has it reduced terror attacks? Yes, dramatically. And so they are safer because of it, which is, of course, relevant to the last episode of the show where we kind of talked about the situation on our border with Mexico a little bit, and people talking about whether or not we should have a wall. It's like, you know what? Can they find ways around it? Yes, they can. At least they'll have to work for it.
Delayed gratification.
Exactly. If you make
work for your meal.
If you make it sufficiently difficult, there will be few people who are interested in even trying. It's really that simple. But back to Israel now. The conversation turned to Gaza a little bit. Now, I remember many years ago now. I don't know if you remember the exact year or not, when Israel decided to pull out of Gaza. Now, what do you recall, Paige, about the international reaction to Israel announcing they're going to pull out of Gaza?
Oh gosh, that's something I've got to go back and look at.
Okay,
it's such an expansive history.
It is, and there are so many rabbit trails. Now, what I remember is that situation is a perfect example of why in the international media's eyes and everything, there is absolutely nothing Israel can do right, because the constant barrage that the clarion call has been, Israel needs to pull out of the occupied territories and leave them to the Palestinian people, yada 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 yada. Well, okay,
it's just hard to occupy a territory that you own. It is your territory.
Right.
History is people stealing other people's stuff. History is war. History is conquest. Yes. History is political geography.
Yes, this is. I
can't think of any other country that has conquered an area where we just pretend that they haven't.
Exactly. It's like after a while, you're just kind of like, oh, you know what? I guess. But specifically with Gaza, Israel said, you know what? All right, fine. We're going to do a little experiment here, and we're going to pull out of Gaza. So, and this was back, if I remember correctly, when Kofi Annan was still head of the UN. And it was outcry. It was like, oh my gosh, you're going to abandon those people, and they're not going to have services, they're not going to have this, and not going to have that, and you're going to prevent them from getting into Israel, and yada, 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 yada. Like, but you want us to leave. We're leaving. Yeah. It was like, but you're just going to let them fend for themselves? That's kind of what leaving means. Yeah. So do you want us to leave or not? We don't care what you want. We're leaving. So, and leave they did. And of course, Gaza turned into even more of a crap hole. And as we all well know, Hamas now, through the process of election, actually runs that little strip of land. And they are in charge of providing all the services and so on and so forth. And of course, they do so that they can put rocket launchers on the tops of freaking hospitals and regularly launch them into Israel over the wall. So, that's worked out great.
And now that area was actually it was back in 2000. This was when Clinton was president. It was the Camp David II summit.
Yeah, okay.
And I want to say it was Barack, who was the prime minister of Israel at the time, and Yasser Arafat went and met, and Israel offered complete independence for the Palestinians in Gaza, 100% of Gaza, 92% of the West Bank, most of Jerusalem, including the Old City, religious sovereignty over the Temple Mount. And basically all that they asked was that the PLO would officially announce an end to the conflict. Yeah. So that no more conflict would happen. They basically wanted just peace. Yep. And that an agreement be made that the borders of Israel from there on out not be subject to constant violation. And that was when Yasser Arafat was still head of the PLO, and he just got up and walked out.
Yeah.
So all you had to, literally all you have to do to get this land that you keep for decades now have been requesting, all you have to do to get it is agree to stop killing people, stop terrorist attacks, and that's it. I mean, you get control of the Temple Mount, the holy area, and most of Jerusalem. All you have to do is not bomb people, not infiltrate, not kill people, and that was too much to ask. That's just, I think that's very telling.
And very unfortunate. And again, this has been the pattern all along. Every single thing, no matter how much the Israelis are willing to give up, they always say, no, we want it all.
And, so what has happened is that Israel has ended up with control of the entire area.
Which is hilarious. the people who started out willing to give up almost all of it, almost all of it, have ended up with almost all of it. Whereas the people who insist on all or nothing, well, guess what? Guess which end of that equation you're getting.
Yeah, I mean the biggest barrier to Palestinian independence is the Palestinians.
Which to me tells me exactly that it's not, the issue isn't even the land. It's not. The land, I don't think it has a dang thing to do with it. The fact is, they don't want the Jews there. That's what it boils down to. It boils down to, we don't want Jews there. We don't care about the land. I mean, yeah, that'll be great. Having Mediterranean access and everything, that'd be wonderful. But that's not what we really care about. Because there have been plenty of negotiated borders that would have given them access to the Med. Instead, no. We just don't want Jews anywhere near here at all. They can all go, we don't care. And, I guess they would say they can go straight to Sheol.
Well, they've declared that entire area that the Ottomans once ruled to be, and again, forgive me if I mispronounce this, a Waqf, which is basically a God-given holy land. And so any non-Muslim government in control of any of that land is seen as putting the Arabs into unification, basically.
Right, and that was the exact that was the exact point of view put forth by that Hamas leader that Ami Horowitz interviewed in that link that you shared with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was exactly that's exactly what he said, was that no, all of this land was given to us in the Bibles. I don't know how he gets that, but he was very confident, though, extremely confident.
He says that Palestine is in the Bible, but really is.
And so, yeah, I'm like,
Philistia, which interestingly, okay, so Palestine itself, the word,
yes,
is actually the only root of where the word goes back to is Hebrew. So it comes from the Jewish translation.
Yeah, it's not Arabic at all. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it talk about that.
Peleshet, that's what it is. Peleshet.
Ah, there you go.
And
that
which
seems appropriate.
is Philistia.
Yes.
Which was Romanized into Palestine.
Exactly.
And then the area of Palestine was named by the British in 1917 on a map that they drew up, which covered Judea and the Galilee.
Yep. Yeah, that Hamas guy, that contemporary Hamas guy, again, very clear that no, we just want it all. It's like no, it's like they genuinely think that all of that land, all of it, was given to them specifically by Allah. It's like no. No. And you guys actually lucked out, because you wound up with most of the land that was actually, or if I remember correctly, and I should probably go back and check this out, but most of it was actually kind of set aside. Well, you can't say it was set aside for the descendants of Abraham, which of course they are through Ishmael. But
I mean, it's basically ancient Canaan and
right. Yeah. But of course we all know from reading the Bible that it wasn't Ishmael wasn't the guy. he wasn't
very fond. He wasn't the favorite.
No. It was, might have been this guy Isaac. I don't know. But yeah, that's exactly the thing. And of course, that's their whole thing. That's exactly where they separate. It's like, nope, everything that happens after that, we really don't care about. Ishmael, that's our guy, and that's what's supposed to be all his, so therefore it's all ours. And it's like, yeah, that's not the way it wound up playing out. You can argue whether or not that seems fair, but oh well. That's the way it's been for a while. And yeah, if anything, if there's any prophecy in the Bible that actually has borne out, it has been borne out over time, it's the one where it says, the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac, they're just not going to get along.
Yeah.
It's like, I remember reading that for the first time after I learned that Arabs claim their descent through Ishmael. I'm like, yep, that's exactly right. I was like,
well, it does make sense.
Yeah, I was like, that is 100% how things have played out. So anyway, the whole it is interesting that actually we're getting close to wrap up time here. So we should actually go and recap just a little bit. So essentially, looking at the history, looking at where the word Palestine even comes from, looking at the history of the borders, looking at the history of the people in the land, there is no distinct country of Palestine that belongs to anything that we call the Palestinian people. And
because there is the Palestinian people.
What's that?
It would be the Philistines, which were really Greece, from off the coast of Greece.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So that's actually interesting to think about as well. But that's a whole other train of thought that will take us down a whole different historical road. But there is in any case, the people claiming to be Palestinian surely are not part of the Philistines. They are definitely Arab, and they happen to be living within these borders that some refer to as Palestine, which again is a term that only has relevance actually in relation to Israel and its borders.
Mm-hmm.
And I even remember an old episode of Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher way back in the day, where he was actually talking about this, and he references that once upon I think he was telling a story that someone else had told him that had gone to Israel when it was actually still legally referred to as Palestine. And I was like, yeah, okay, but it was called Palestine, but it was Jewish. It was 100% Jewish state. I was like, yeah, no kidding. At first that struck me as very interesting. Now it's more strikes me as duh. So now, did you find out all of this, Paige, when you were just as you were researching for this particular article, or was it something that you had stumbled across before and just decided to put it together?
As I said before, I had started looking into it back, several years ago when President Obama was still in office. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just want to share this information. And never got around to it. But then when President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which coincided with the, I believe it was 70 years. I could be wrong on that number, but it was the anniversary of the Israel declaring independence at the end of the British Mandate. And all of the violence broke out.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
And suddenly you just saw people in the media. I mean, it's just like the poor Palestinians, and they're, violent.
Yeah, as you said, burning swastika kites.
Yes.
Little burning swastika kites.
And so I just thought, nope.
Yeah.
This is the time. I've got to go back and reread all of that research. And in my email, I have all these folders of topics where I save my research. And I went back and looked and just reread everything that I had found and looked further and just tried to put it together. And I like having things laid out for me. That's why I went with a timeline.
Well, yeah, and you you laid out a very, very good detailed timeline, again, complete with maps and everything to illustrate the changing situation, so that anyone can look at this and you can follow it easily. And honestly, if you click on the links, again, they're shared on the Twitter feed, and I'll put them on the YouTube video as well. Click on those links, and you can find. And you can easily go to, okay, what happened at this time? So, and because it's broken up with years and it's got the maps, it's easy to break this thing off in chunks. And you don't have to.
And I've listed out all the resources, all of the citations are below the article, so everyone can go and actually look themselves.
Right. Yeah. So this, you can go back, you can do the back research, find out if Paige is lying to you. She's not.
That's right. You should always verify.
Exactly. Good advice from President Reagan. And yeah, just again, the idea, the way that frankly, the Israelis have been mistreated throughout all of this. I know it's not popular to think of them as the ones that are mistreated, but they're the ones who are constantly getting invaded and constantly getting the coffee shops blown up. It's really bad. I mean, the fact that a Jew cannot go and pray at the Temple Mount. Honestly, I do not understand how that makes any sense, because that is, I mean, it's the site of the ancient Jewish temple for hundreds, thousands of years. There was a temple there. where they did all of their sacrifices. It was a destruction of that temple that led to the synagogue system that we all know of today. But that temple is where they did all the ritual sacrifices. The temple, that place where Jews are not allowed to go and pray, that's also the place where Jesus went and kicked the money changers out of. Yeah, that temple.
With a whip.
with a friggin' whip, people.
Turning over tables.
Exactly.
He was mad.
That Temple Mount. That temple is the one where Jews and Christians are, I believe, allowed to go pray there. I know it has been a thing in the past. But the idea that Jews can't go and pray there is maddening to me. But Muslims, sure as heck they can. They can go to the Temple Mount and pray. And literally their only claim on it is that their claim that the angel Gabriel took Muhammad on a ride to heaven or something one time. Yeah. I'm like,
on a creature. I can't remember if it was a horse or what.
I don't know if it was a horse.
And it's not ever identified as Israel.
What's that?
I mean, it's not ever identified as Jerusalem.
Oh, I didn't even know
in
that.
The text.
That's fascinating. Okay, they just claim
it was later.
Okay, they just claim that. Yeah, this was where the Temple Mount right there, which is. I'm sorry. Even if the claim was accurate, even if it was in the text, it's like, okay, you got one event throughout your whole history that is of significance there, whereas the Jews have literally their whole history there. Literally the whole history after escaping Egypt.
But also, you have to keep in mind that Muslims consider themselves the true Jews.
I don't know
so that's also relevant.
The true descendants of Abraham. Which, okay, I can see where that would give them a claim to the land itself.
I mean, religiously.
But to the Temple Mount in particular, they certainly have no greater claim on that than the Jews. That's for dang sure. And that point in particular frustrates me. So anyway, again, we are about out of time now. Before we do go, I do want to point out that Paige has got several other red pills that she has dropped. A couple of them concerning the early days of the Revolutionary War and even before that, leading up to it. Which Paige, I'd love to have you on again to talk about those sometime.
Oh, I'd love to. It's a great subject.
Oh, it is, and we'll have to coincide it with some sort of appropriate holiday or something, which we just passed, which would have been fantastic. But we wanted to get to this one, so we'll have to see what our schedules look like, maybe around Veterans Day or some such, and maybe do it then. And also, I think the most recent red pill was one on the media, which, I think most of our audience is going to understand the issues we've got going on there. But again, thank you, Paige, for coming on, and everyone go to noqreport.com. Check out Paige's articles there. You can click on her profile there. It'll bring you right to a link with all of her stuff. And again, I'll be including the links to the articles on Palestine in the show notes, and I've got them on the Twitter there, so you can go right to that and actually read a little bit on what we're talking about here. And again, you can find the show at Fighting Void. You can also email fightingvoid@gmail.com, and of course, Paige, you can follow at Painting Pastor on Twitter, and I highly recommend that you do so. So so we'll be out for 2 weeks again until next time, when we're going to be taking a break from the serious stuff, and Crystal will be back to discuss the merits of the Hobbit movies. I expect it to be highly entertaining because, let's just say, our opinions differ just a little bit.
I'm gonna have to go watch them.
Well, I won't completely spoil my perspective by agreeing or disagreeing with you. So, but I will say this: if you want to fully understand, if you plan on watching, and if you want the full context of what we're talking about, go and go and watch them. And if anyone out there hasn't actually read The Hobbit, shame on you. Go and do it. You've got 2 weeks. It's only 300 or so pages. Go do it now. All right. And until then, keep fighting the good fight, and we will see you next time.